4 press conferences, and 7 years later, we have discovered who she is with the help of multiple partners. And this truly was local to federal in efforts to discover who she was. We have identified her as Patricia Kalina Goodwin.
My fiance is missing.
You've heard the stories.
They killed my baby.
He did not deserve this.
You may even know the people.
I'll never give up.
Now, learn more about the cases from Fox 19's Cincinnati Crime Vault. The assignment, the tips, the in-depth backstory on Cincinnati's true crime series.
My life,
Cincinnati Crime Vault,
as I knew it,
Beyond the Broadcast,
changed forever.
starts now with Jessica Schmidt.
Welcome back to another episode of Cincinnati's Crime Vault, and we have some big news to share with you this episode. The Avondale Jane Doe case, which we have covered in the past, has been solved. Before listening to this episode, though, we would encourage you to go back and listen to episodes 23 and 24 of Season 2 if you haven't listened to those already. They'll give you a lot more detail and just some background on this case. We are going to recap it and walk you through how we got to this point where we learned the Avondale Jane Doe's identity, but I think it would be helpful to listen to those again if you haven't listened yet. So here's really that breakdown of how we got to this point where this case has been solved. So according to the Hamilton County, Ohio coroner, Dr. Lakshmi Samarko, back on May 31st of 2018, a woman was found wrapped in a blanket and partially buried in a shallow mulch bed along Glenwood Avenue in Avondale, Ohio. That's a Cincinnati area neighborhood. She had a rose that had been seemingly placed on her chest, which led to her being known not only as the Avondale Jane Doe, but also as the Rose Lady. Over the years, the Hamilton County Coroner's Office held at least 4 different press conferences, basically just asking the public for any information, trying to figure out who this woman was and how she ended up where she did. They also teamed up with several different agencies, including the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. A criminal intelligence analyst and forensic artist, Samantha Molnar, actually created a 3D clay sculpture of the Avondale Jane Doe's face based on the woman's skull and bone structure. They also worked with researchers from The Ohio State University, and those researchers used a program that's typically used for game design. It's built for game design to create digital renderings, and those renderings showed what the Avondale Jane Doe might have looked like when she was alive, and of course they based all of that also on her skeletal remains. All of that work did at different points lead to some leads, but nothing that really panned out until recently. With help from BCI and also the FBI, investigators used Rose Lady's DNA and forensic genetic genealogy to confirm that the Jane Doe is actually a distant relative of the Hamilton County coroner, Dr. Samarko's best friends. What a crazy coincidence, right? That the Hamilton County coroner, Dr. Samarko, just so happens to have a really close friend who lives in the Cincinnati area who happens to have a connection, a distant relation to the Avondale Jane Doe. It's just wild to think about, but they were able to confirm that distant relation. Here's Dr. Samarko talking just a little bit about that.
I got a call last year in May 2024, so exactly a year ago, from one of my best friends who told me she was really worried because the FBI had been trying to reach her. And she said, they've sent me emails, they've called me. Am I in trouble? And I said, I don't know. I can call them and find out, would you do something I need to know about? And she said, not that I know of. And so anyway, long story short, FBI was trying to reach her about this case. And they said, hey, she may be related to your unidentified woman from 2018. And as it turns out, she was. And she did give her DNA sample, and it was crucial in being able to identify her. In fact, they share great-grandparents. So it was an amazing coincidence. But again, her willingness to come forward and share her DNA really helped us with identifying Patricia.
So once they confirmed this relation, they used that to build out a family tree. And at some point, they narrowed things down to a woman named Patricia Kalina Goodwin, a woman they know at some point in her life had lived in the Mason area, which is in Warren County, Ohio. And they essentially figured out, there's a pretty good chance this is probably the Jane Doe, but we need more information to confirm it. Well, Goodwin's son had died in 2019, and so the coroner's office had brought his body in after his death, and they had access to his DNA. They were able to test his DNA against the Avondale Jane Doe's DNA and confirmed that it was a match, that the two were in fact mother and son, essentially then confirming the identity of the Avondale Jane Doe, or the Rose Lady, as Patricia Kalina Goodwin. Here's Dr. Samarco again.
4 press conferences, and 7 years later, we have discovered who she is with the help of multiple partners, and this truly was local to federal in efforts to discover who she was. So we have identified her as Patricia Kalina Goodwin. When there was a suspicion of who she was, we found out in BCI's database, they found out that she had a son who was deceased. And we looked in our database, and lo and behold, the son had come to our office a year later, in November 2019. So we were able to use the blood card, the DNA evidence that we still had on him, ran the profile a week and a half ago. That was submitted to a genetic statistician to give us an idea of the percentage chance that this was her son, and we did know who he was. He had ID, and he had been identified when he was brought to our office, and it was 99.9996% that it was her son.
Dr. Samarco mentioned, too, when she made this announcement, that over the years she had gotten some calls from different people in the community who thought maybe the Avondale Jane Doe could be one of their loved ones. And so Dr. Samarco would look at medical imaging and compare medical imaging to see if it was a possibility. And once they figured out that Patricia Goodwin was likely the Rose Lady, she looked at Goodwin's medical records, too.
We got a lot of leads from the public, and we followed up with as many as we could. I know on at least 2 separate occasions, I looked at medical imaging from local area hospitals on 2 different women that were suggested could be her, or families were missing her, and gave names, and we pulled up the medical imaging, and I was able to look at the bones and say, no, that's not a match. Recently, when it was discovered of who she might be, and this was done through genealogy, we did acquire her chest x-ray from one of the local hospitals. I did compare it to the imaging we had of our Jane Doe, who we affectionately called Rose Lady because she was discovered with a rose on her chest. And from the beginning, we said we did not suspect foul play. So I looked at her chest x-ray and compared her bones on the chest x-ray to our x-rays. And because of the decomposition of the body, some of the bones were somewhat obscured, but the bones that I could see, I could at least say I can't eliminate this person. This person could definitely be a possibility.
Back to Goodwin's son. So I mentioned that he had died in 2019. So he died basically a year after his mother passed away. And again, his body was taken to the coroner's office, and so they had his DNA. Dr. Samarco says both of them, Goodwin and her son, had died of a drug overdose. And she believes Goodwin's son is probably the person who buried Goodwin and left that rose on her chest. Although she did stress there's really no way for them to know that for sure.
Our understanding is that she was homeless, and her cause of death was a drug overdose, as was the cause of death for her son. And when he was discovered, our investigator that went to the scene and spoke to the people, and he was discovered, by the way, just over a mile from where she was discovered. So very close, but spoke to the people in the area that knew him, and in fact his tent mate, from what I understand, somebody he shared the tent with, that he had been with his mother, but she had passed a year before. So that story kind of fit too. Just talking to the tent mate for her son, Jason, it's likely that they were together and that he tried to bury his mother the best that he could and left a rose on her chest. That's what we think might have happened, but it's all just guessing at this point. But it sort of fits with the information that we were getting from the people that knew them. What had happened in the interim since 2014's BMV photo to how she got there, that's a mystery to all of us. And the family lost track of her.
Although investigators are obviously really glad to now know the Rose Lady's identity and to know that the Avondale Jane Doe is no longer a Jane Doe and is Patricia Goodwin, Dr. Sammarco did say she feels some sadness just about the circumstances surrounding this case and this significant development.
Her family had been looking for her since 2018. So she'd been missed, and her brother passed away a month ago, still wondering what had happened to his sister. So, but at least her nephew knows now and the rest of the family. But I mean, this kind of closure, that's one of the things that we do in this office is try and bring that peace and closure to the families. I'm just sad that her brother passed away not knowing what happened to his sister and that he had been looking for her, and that's, whatever, I don't know if she has any other siblings left, but, at least she's got a nephew that we know of and maybe other members who had also been wondering what had happened to her and possibly her son. So at least they have some closure now. And, she is buried in Spring Grove Cemetery. Cincinnati buried her in the Spring Grove Cemetery, as was he. So they have a record, a plot number, and so forth. So if family members wanted to go and visit or pay their respects, they do now know where she is or where he is, and they can do that.
Now that they have closed this case and they've confirmed the Jane Doe's identity, the big message now, not just from Dr. Sammarco, but from Ohio BCI and from the FBI, is if you have a loved one missing in the state of Ohio, you should contact BCI for help because they have a lot of resources and access to different tools. Some of the things we talked about, the clay sculptures or the digital renderings, and they might be able to help with your relative's case as well.
My request today is for any families out there in the state of Ohio that haven't seen their loved one, that don't know that resource is out there, they can call our toll-free number. It's 855-BCI Ohio. They can report their loved one to us. Even if they've already reported it to a local agency, we can assist on that. If they did report it and they feel like their case isn't getting worked, they can still call us. We're here to help. We're here to facilitate between us, the coroner's offices, and the local agencies to help move these cases along and help match with DNA.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Really happy that we're able to share some great news about a case, that this case has been solved and this woman has been identified as Patricia Kalina Goodwin. We hope that this does bring some closure, some peace, some sense of healing to all of her family members, especially those who have been looking for her and wondering what happened to her for likely a pretty long time. This podcast was researched, written, and hosted by me, Jessica Schmidt. Executive producers of this podcast are Robin Tyndall, who is also the creator of Cincinnati's Crime Vault, and Megan Laird.